Okay, hey everybody, welcome to an episode of On the Wrist from Off the Cuff. To have another cool review for you guys from the brand Praesidus Watch Company. A little bit about them. They're a micro brand originally inspired by World War II veteran paratrooper Tom Rice to recreate his long-lost A11 field watch. The brand has since grown and expanded to offer full lineups of various models, while still honoring their roots by donating 5% of each sale in support of war veterans associations and communities. Additionally, their watches do proudly offer American assembly. Now, in terms of the type of watch, I'd say this falls right into that classic field watch story. I say space, but it has an interesting story. But in terms of a classic field watch, of course, you're going to want to find something with a modest vintage style size with Arabic numerals, typically a 12 and or 24 hour scale with a black or cream dial. This is the Praesidus Watch Co. Rec Spec in the white popcorn colorway, and essentially short for Reconnaissance Spec. This piece pays tribute to the 1960s Seiko 5 dress watch that became an iconic field watch. Military Assistance Command Vietnam Studies and Observation Group, aka MACV-SOG, personnel had to source gear from outside of the traditional military procurement channels, and this led to going directly into the Vietnamese market to buy local Seiko watches. Then these were chosen for their robust build quality, reliability, paired with their super readable dial layout, which was known for its low light legibility as well. And this particular white popcorn variant embraces the original's kind of dressy and field attributes for a more cohesive modern wear that becomes even more versatile on this particular optional beads of rice bracelet. These go for $355 direct on bracelet and only $295 on strap, and these are killer value if you ask me. But one thing to consider here is that this really is meant to kind of take a Seiko 5 and modernize it. This is not meant to be a high-end model. It just happens to really over-deliver in quite a few verticals, and there'd be one thing that some of you will not be happy with. But for me, in terms of the theme and the price point, I think it all makes sense. But with all that said, let's go ahead, zoom the camera out, get this piece in hand, and take a closer look. Okay, guys, so very, very handsome. And again, in this particular layout, they've really leaned into the field watch space, even though traditionally this was more of a dress watch. So I kind of like that they really kind of made it a bit purer of an execution. The nice thing is, though, if you really want to get that old school aesthetic and the dressier style, that option is available. They do actually have a silvery sunray model. It's actually a gray sunray. Unfortunately, the beads of rice bracelet is only available on the one that has the more greenish tinted lume. I preferred the white tinted lume here, and I thought that this, the texture on this dial was definitely worth showcasing, so that's the one that I chose. Big shout out to Praesidus for sending this piece in for me to share with you all. But let's get into the details here, guys. So this is a 38 millimeter diameter piece, so just 38, which is very well sized, especially for this type of watch. 12.2 millimeters thick, and that's including the crystal there. 45 millimeters lug to lug, stainless steel, brushed and with high polished accents. Guys, look at this case. Beautifully satin brushed, and then you do have, of course, I got a couple fingerprints on there. It's a warm summer day here, so hopefully that you guys are you're gonna see a lot of fingerprints. All right, but check that out. Nice and clean transition. Very, very cool. And they really nailed the aesthetic here in terms of the look and the feel, even choosing to offer a beads of rice bracelet within that kind of period correct era. I think that's awesome. So very, very cool. 45 millimeters lug to lug, guys. Super duper wearable, especially when you consider the slope that are on this on the lugs that are here that are pierced, as you can see, nicely drilled. And then getting into the crystal. Now this is going to be a sticking point for some people. This is a boxed sapphire coated K1 mineral, so hardened mineral, and it does have a sapphire coating versus it just being made out of sapphire. And some of you can say, why wouldn't they just use a sapphire crystal? And I think that's fair. This does have an AR coating, which is great. It is beautifully shaped, and you can see nicely boxed. And it doesn't have a milky ring because mineral crystals don't have that. So that is a plus. Also, one of the pluses are going to be the fact that it's going to be less shatter prone. That's one of the things with as hard as sapphire is. You can't scratch it very easily, but you can break it easier than you can mineral. So this does offer a certain level of impact protection, but with the sapphire coating, I guess the idea is that you can kind of get a best of both worlds. Also, again, you know, Seiko is still putting mineral crystals inside of, you know, on top of their Seiko 5s. So I think in terms of thematically, it still goes. Do I wish that they would have just done a sapphire and just, you know, made it a little bit easier? Even at, you know, the trade-off or a slight lack of clarity, in case, you know, the shape of this crystal might have conflicted and gave it a bit of a milky ring at certain angles. Sure, I can live with that. But again, this watch is under $300 if you get it on a strap. And I think a lot of people will enjoy this watch on a strap, on a NATO, on a two-piece leather, whatever it may be, on a rubber strap. But, you know, at $355 on this beautiful beads of rice, I mean, these are the type of bracelets you see on watches costing a lot more. I mean, these are fully articulated beads here. This isn't where they kind of faux beads of rice, which you've seen typically in this price range. So, again, guys, there are trade-offs. It's not the perfect watch. Some of you are going to be like, oh, no, like that's going to, like, don't let that be a deal breaker for you because you're going to be missing out. So I'm just going to throw that out there. But again, I have a whole lot of watches, so it's really easy for me to say not every watch has to be perfect because I own hundreds and I have a lot, you know, and more than 10, probably 20 or 30 that are in heavy rotation. So with that said, now that that's out of the way, let's get into another detail, which is going to be this bezel, which is really beautifully done. Check that out. Vertical brushing, and then you do have, of course, a high polished bevel on the outer portions. Here's another thing with this crown. It is a push-pull crown, and it is very, very true to the original. Now, the original watch had a movement that was non-hacking and non-hand windable, so the crown just needed to be hidden, and that was one of the reasons that also made it a great tactical watch. You don't have a big crown sticking out, you know, and digging into your wrist. The thing here is now you do have a hacking and hand windable movement, and to hand wind it, guys, there's not a lot of room for purchase for the tactile engagement with the crown. So you're basically going to be pulling one of these here, just going to do that to wind it, and it's not going to feel great and it's not going to be super useful. The good news is typically you just get that going or you just give it a shake. You don't need to ever wind it technically, but I think that is something that, you know, Seiko, I would say, has done probably a better job as of late, where they've recreated modern watches or recreated modern iterations of some of their classics and just made them you know, they've done a little bit of a trade-off to make things a little bit more functional here and there. In this case, this crown could have been more functional, but again, at the price point, guys, under $300, $295 for this watch on a strap. I mean, this is pretty killer still. Mostly just for the fit and finish, the tolerances. This is a very, very nice watch made by a brand that knows how to make really nice watches. But, you know, typically they're more halo-oriented watches, you know, are going to cost a premium. Here, you're going to get that similar fit and finish, but at a much lower price point because of little trade-offs here and there. So, again, not perfect. I still like it a whole lot. But the movement inside, NH36, super reliable, basically, you know, a universally branded version of Seiko's 4R36. So it's the day-date complication, as you guys can see here. Really cool kind of offset in terms of the colorways there. You have a black disc and a white disc, which is a whole lot of fun. 41-hour power reserve, beats at 3 hertz or 21,600 vibrations per hour in terms of the beat rate. You do have a solid case back here with some etching. It is very nicely done. It's actually a cool satinized look here. Check that out. So very, very clean, and that feels good on the back of your wrist, to be quite honest. So yeah, I dig that. Now getting into the dial itself, I think that is really what is cool here, guys. The textures, just the old school font, it all just really comes together. So you have this beautiful textured black dial with a framed date complication at 3 o'clock with contrasting discs, like I mentioned. You have these really cool polished hands, and of course it's reflecting off of a black camera lens in this case, so it's not going to stand out as much, but out in the real world you'll see these hands reflecting quite well. The lume, though it is unspecified in terms of the particular compound, it does glow green. It's a nice green, and you can see they do have these beautifully raised indices here that are, of course, Arabic numerals in a very specific font that pays tribute to the original Seiko 5 that inspired this piece. Now, getting into the water resistance, 5 atmospheres or 50 meters, which isn't, super great. Like, I would have loved 100 meters. 200 would have been amazing. But then, of course, you probably would have wanted a screw down crown. They would have had to re-engineer a lot and whatnot. But 5 atmospheres or 50 meters definitely does the job. I would feel completely comfortable with this one, just because with that crown, I don't think you're going to accidentally have that popped out. And of course, if you get a bunch of sweat on here, you get a bunch of gunk wearing it out in the field. The good news is you can easily rinse it off, and 50 meters will be more than enough water resistance as long as your crown is pushed in, and that's something to always remember. Now, in terms of the bracelet here, 20 millimeter lugs, guys. So potential for an absolute strap monster. This is going to look amazing on, NATO style nylon straps. And, of course, I think originally these looked really great, and they still actually have it as an option. You can pick these up on a Tropic strap, which looks really cool, Tropic style strap. And I think this looks really great. But guys, the bracelet on here just takes it up a notch, especially with that history of it being just a bit of a dressier watch. I love that kind of idea to tap into that, accentuate those original kind of roots within the story. And I think it looks great. Solid stainless steel, fully articulated beads of rice, screw pin construction, guys. Again, screw pin construction at this price point is just awesome. So 6-position manual micro adjustment, push button, nicely milled, nicely signed. I mean, it does the job. So with all that said, let's actually get this piece on the wrist and see how it wears. Okay, guys, as you can see on my 7.5-inch wrist, I think this wears absolutely perfectly. Check out the way that it hugs the wrist, just lays beautifully there. Very, very nice. Of course, if I get my wrist a bit too close to the camera lens, you're going to get some perspective distortion. It's going to make the watch seem a lot larger than it actually is. But I have to say, I mean, even at this profile, check that out. It sits really wonderfully. But what I like to do is keep my wrist nice and low, and then just kind of tighten up the frame here so you guys can get still a detailed look, but just add a bit of a truer aspect ratio as to how this may lay on your own wrist. And as you guys can see there, you're getting a lot more centered look there with the watch head over my wrist. And although my wrist is slightly on the larger side at 7.5 inches, I will say that you guys can see it's quite tall. It's a rounder wrist, so it's not like it's super flat and wide and accommodating. So, I do have to be quite considerate in terms of ultimate lug to lug and case proportions and all of that. But I gotta say, this thing wears really, really great. They nailed, again, that Seiko ergonomic play. I really, really think that's awesome. And yeah, there's a part of me that wishes they would have just went kind of all in and said, let's just make this watch cost, maybe $750 and put a sapphire in it, improve the crown, put a thinner movement in there, something like that. Even maybe put a Swiss movement in there. But at the same time, these are USA assembled pieces, and a Swiss movement paired to that, and a Swiss movement really doesn't have to do with the theme here. I mean, a Seiko movement makes sense. So I think they should still probably, even in a premium version, probably stick with the Seiko movement in this case, just because it is true to the original. Because the original was, a really fun Seiko that just happened to have Arabic numeral dial, happened to just be robust, and also, of course, be something that if you got caught with it would look pretty natural, right? It doesn't look like some, GI government issue type of kits. So, you know, there wasn't going to be a bunch of serial numbers or anything like that marking this as official gear. You still had kind of plausible deniability if somebody stopped you on the streets and you had, you know, one of those original Seikos on. And in this case, guys, you're getting to kind of have that reimagined and refocused and I think improved in terms of that basic, you know, recipe for a really cool watch that is absolutely versatile in terms of being field ready and also quite dressy. I mean, you could take this out on Libo as well. That's Liberty for those of you that didn't serve. But it's something that I really dig about this. It's very nostalgic. And of course that ties into Praesidus as a brand and, you know, really their love and care for those classic American field watches. So with that said, let's actually get this off the wrist, set up for some lume shots, low light transition, and closing thoughts. Okay, let's go ahead and hit the lights here. Hey, look at that. So for a field watch, definitely has a lot of extra lume. Those 3D raised indices look fantastic. And although I don't believe they're full lume blocks or anything, the application clearly is very well done. Unfortunately, the handset, because of the slimmer nature, definitely doesn't necessarily stand up next to the indice lume and the index there. You can see that it is a bit faded by comparison. And I would say it's probably more about how bright the hour markers are and probably less about how unbright the handset is. You know, of course, the handset isn't super bright, but I think considering the amount of lume, that sliver of lume that's designed there, let me just give it a little supercharge. You can see that is not a lot of real estate in terms of luminance. So that's, I mean, no matter how well you apply it, sometimes, unfortunately, just because of the volume of lume that's available, you know, it's just not going to glow super bright. But again, I don't think this is the perfect watch, but man, is it one that I'm really enjoying. Now, one thing I always like to work in is always going to be a bit of a low light transition because you're always going to be out in the middle of a field enjoying direct sunlight. A lot of times you're going to find yourself coming in and out of buildings, walking underneath overhangs, or just hanging out underneath the shade of a tree. So it's nice to see what these colors, textures, and finishes render like in less than optimal lighting. And guys, I have to say, this watch is finished like a watch that would cost twice as much. You know, like this, what, $355? I mean, this feels like what many would consider quite nice in like a $750 watch. You know, some people would of course not want a Seiko movement at that price point, and of course you would want a sapphire crystal at that price point. But again, I mean, look at the clarity you're getting on this crystal. So I mean, it's hard to be upset with it because, you know what, I'm not going to thrash this watch, so I'm not too worried about scratching the crystal. And the fact that, yeah, it does have you know, it's very interesting and a more of a hybrid style setup. I think, you know, unfortunately the brand that's really infamous for these types of crystals is going to be Invicta, in terms of doing the whole flame fusion, where you have a coating of sapphire on top of a hardened mineral. But you guys can see here, this thing looks great. It's very, very handsome. You know, it's really well built. Again, this watch could easily, with a different movement and a different crystal, even in the same brand, like it doesn't even need a newer or bigger or whatever artsy type of brand name. This is easily the build quality commensurate with something above $750. Like, this is, even if they charge $1,000 for this watch, I'm again not counting the crystal, not thinking about the movement or anything like that, and not being Swiss made. I think the case and bracelet stand up. I mean, this bracelet in particular, I mean, it looks very similar to bracelets that, you know, you'll find on Nevada Grenchen, which are, you know, Swiss made pieces that are a lot more expensive. But I think this thing looks great, guys. So I'm going to open up the floor to you guys as I kind of get the lights back on and work on my closing thoughts. Definitely let me know how you feel about this one. Are you happy that, I mean, there's less watches that do this, right? So I think there's a part of me that's happy that they went this way in terms of keeping it affordable, but then, you know, of course, there being some trade-offs. You know, closing thoughts from you guys on the wrist. classic proportions. They sit perfectly on the wrist. You know, in terms of model variants, definitely check the site links in the video description for options and availability, because those things change. But there are some pretty cool ones. There's like a brown kind of chocolatey tropic dial. There's you know, a sunray gray, which looks really, really great. And then there's different variations. You can get like the really bright white loom, or you can also get kind of a green tint type of loom that also looks very good. But for me, I thought kind of the black and white, it just worked as being just something a little bit extra versatile in my case. So for me, guys, one thing to mention, comparable models, you know, modern Seiko 5 price point, which is great, with build quality more comparable to Prospex or Presage, to be quite honest. And then you're also going to get some things you're not going to get in Prospex or Presage, which is going to be screw pin construction. So, I mean, there's that. And yeah, it's a great looking case, well finished, you know, a lot of great details, and then you have it on a fully articulated beads of rice. So for me, guys, bottom line, I love how affordable the Rec Spec is. You know, it has a great story, and then it keeps true to its Seiko 5 roots in terms of its spec sheet. It's not trying to overdo it. And you know, have done these videos for a long time, and every time I, you know, cover something that's kind of a premium recreation, I get a lot of people saying, hey, this misses the mark. It's not, you know, it's not true to the spirit of the original, because it's not super affordable. It's not super robust. It's not meant to be knocked around. I like that here. You could argue that this actually is. This is a watch that's really meant to be worn, and really enjoyed, and it's robust enough to do those things. So yeah, let me know what you guys think in the comments below. If you like the video, please hit like, and if you're already, please subscribe for more content just like this. Thanks, guys.